Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with Rosie Gilmosh, your host, and joining me today I have got Julia Samuel. Now, hello Julia.
Hello Rosie.
Many of you may recognise the name because Julia wrote the book Grief Works, and she has done lots and lots of work in the bereavement sector and has recently launched an app that goes alongside the book. So we are going to talk about that in a little bit because, as you know, we don't do promotions on here really, but I have looked at the app and I have read the book, and I genuinely believe that this is a really valid and useful tool for somebody who is grieving. So Julia's here to answer a few questions that John and I have on it, and then we're going to have a little bit of a talk to her and find out what brought her into the grief arena. So Julia, tell us a little bit initially about your work in grief. I know that you were very influential in bereavement work in hospitals particularly, and you work with primarily adults who were bereaved as children. Is that correct?
So my kind of NHS role was at St Mary's Paddington, where I worked for 25 years. And there I was counsellor for maternity and paediatrics. So I supported families that had babies and children that died. So that was my kind of real deep experience of children being bereaved of a sibling or parents being bereaved of a child.
Heavy work, that I imagine.
It was very intense and very meaningful. But of course, through it, I also learned that bereaved children are often the forgotten mourners. So bereaved children whose parents die also got very little support. There was always this assumption that children bounce back, children are amazing, and they're not kind of given opportunities to grieve. Because I think we find it unbearable to think of our children suffering when they already are suffering because a parent has died.
Yeah, one of the things I've talked about previously on the podcast is a well-meaning guest that said to my eldest son, who was 7 at the time, I had, excuse me, I now have 4 children because John and I are both widowed and we've married. At the time I had 3, so my eldest was 7, and a very well-meaning guest said, "Oh, Monty, you're the man of the house. You've got to look after your mum now." I mean, it was said with good intentions, but of course this 7-year-old took on this weight, I must protect my mum. So he bottled up feelings and he didn't talk about his grief. And it was only when we got him into counselling, I got him into counselling because, as you know, NHS services, which, excuse me, NHS services for children are very limited for grieving children. So I accessed a charity called Holding On Letting Go, who you may be familiar with, and funded some private counselling for him. And it was only through that I, the kind of damage that this one sentence came out, and I just thought, goodness, yeah, the resilience. Oh, children bounce back, they're resilient, and yeah, they are, but also they don't, as you must say, don't have the vocabulary or the emotional maturity to talk about the things they're feeling. And by the time they are, so much time has passed that, not that you've forgotten, but for example, it's over 5 years since my husband died. And my middle son is autistic, and he very much wasn't able to process it at age 5. Whereas now he's starting to be able to, and there's a lot more things out there. There's a company called Mind Jam that have therapy with online gaming and things. But yeah, they do get a bit almost forgotten because they're not able to articulate, and it might come out in behavioural problems and things like that.
And also, it isn't over. I mean, they may well be resilient and engage with life and have great joy and happiness in life, like you've loved again. But there are different phases of their life where their parent, whether it's a mother or father, they have to rework the loss again. It can be a transitional phase, like going to a new school. It can be if someone's being horrible at school, it puts them in touch with a feeling of loss that then connects them and kind of fast tracks them to a loss of their mother or father, in your case, their dad. So, as much as your well-meaning friend said, you're the man of the house, those expressions are very unhelpful. And I think the thing that helps children most is that they be allowed to be normal, happy children, like get on with life, have fun, but also be bereaved children. And the metaphor we often use is jumping in and out of puddles, that you can jump in a puddle.
I remember the book.
You can jump in the puddle and be very sad for a short time or a long time, and be allowed to be, so not to be told to kind of snap out of it or stop crying, and then jump out of the puddle and kick a football, eat an ice cream, and be very happy.
I also can't remember when, I think it was the anniversary of Ben's death, and I was almost, I guess, trying to force emotion. Not force me is probably the wrong word. I wasn't that strong, but why don't they feel anything? You know, come on, do you not want to go and see Dad's memory stone and things like this? And they didn't. And I spoke to a friend who I am going to actually talk to on the podcast, whose dad died when she was 11. And she said one of the worst things was sort of being forced to grieve. And one of the things we try very hard in our house to do, because we are a very sort of blended patchwork family, is we have lots of pictures of them on the walls. We talk about them quite conversationally. So this is why I'm saying a lot of what I read in your book recently. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. And we do show emotion because it is hard. You know, you talk about transitions to school and things, and we've done this. You know, the little girl who was in my arms when the police knocked on the door to tell me my husband was dead, she's just finishing her first year of reception. And, you know, she's incredible. You know, our eldest is now at secondary school, and I got to be honest with you, it feels like a hug from his dad when he hugs me now. He's massive. And, you know, John's daughter, her mum died. So and obviously Hector. And yeah, we try very much to sort of acknowledge that it still hurts, but the idea that you can be happy and sad at the same time, that the two can coexist, I think is really, really important.
Really important. And that one doesn't knock the other out. So by being happy doesn't stop you feeling sad. And feeling sad shouldn't stop you feeling happy. But often we want to kind of tidy up our feelings, sort of Marie Kondo them into like sad drawer, happy drawer. And no, we hold lots of feelings and lots of loves all at the same time. You know, you love your new husband now, you love Ben. We can love many people all at the same time.
I was actually going to say that, and thank you for remembering his name. That was really kind of you, because it's nice when people do that. Yes, and I have struggled with a little guilt and, you know, confliction about being married again. However, it comes down to that happy and sad, and I'm still here. I still have his children, and I hopefully have, you know, I'm 42. I'm rather hoping I've got another 42 to go. And when people, because nobody said it to our faces, but I'm sure our eyebrows were raised because, you know, they always are. And until my eyebrows would have been raised, you know, back before I lived through it. And I think I've used the analogy more than once of when you have children. You know, you think, I remember ringing my mum and saying, how on earth am I going to love the second one? You know, all my love's in this one. And you do, the human heart, weird capacity to expand. And I still love Ben dearly and deeply, and it breaks my heart that he's not here. But I also love John, and I'm very grateful that I have been fortunate enough to be loved by two men who, you know, push me to be better. And, you know, John is so instrumental in what I'm doing here because he believes in me. So, yeah, it is. But it doesn't mean that I cried this morning walking the dog, Julia. I cried because I was very aware that speaking to you is, you know, quite a career-defining moment for me because I've never done this before. I've never been a podcaster. I've never spoken publicly. But I cried because I'm doing this because my husband's dead. I'm doing this because, you know, because my life was blown apart. So like you said, everything, the happiness, the big events, the big life things, they do come tainted a little bit. And I think accepting that is very much part of moving through the grief.
Yeah, and it's bittersweet. You know, when you have an intensity of feeling, it often brings out all intensity of feelings. And, you know, I feel very touched hearing you think of this as a career-defining moment. I wouldn't think of it as such myself, but
I suppose what I'm saying is it means I feel I'm being validated in the sort of professional field, I guess, because I started speaking into an iPad 6 months ago, Julia, and I had no idea if anybody would even listen. I started up with a very dear friend of mine who is still my very dear friend, but felt that at the moment she's also widowed and it was just too tricky for her. And then I brought in John in, and then the microphones are here and the headphones are, I'm sat in front of a bigger screen, and yes, I feel very, I just goes to the beginning that I'm neurodivergent and the imposter syndrome. It's very real. I shake before every single interview. You know, every single person I speak to. And if they're nervous, I'll sometimes show them so that to sort of put them at ease a little bit. Now, Julia, there's a couple of things I did want to talk to you about, if that's okay. I realise I've sort of gone off on a tangent, but for anybody that listens to the podcast regularly, that is how this goes. You talk about the impacts of a bereavement or a significant trauma at a very young age. Now, I mentioned earlier, my youngest daughter, Tabby, was 6 months old when the door knock came. And Ben, Ben's body's never been found. There's been a lot of complications around it. I had to go to the High Court and have him declared dead. So it's
Awful.
not, even as far as bereavements go, it's
No,
not been
complex.
straightforward.
No.
Yeah. So she was 6 months. I was able to give her, I believe, a fairly normal start to life. My parents lived with me for a while and supported me, helped with school runs. But I was also an alcoholic.
Good for you.
Oh gosh, yeah, my parents are incredible. They are. They then rented a house near me so they could stay for a full year.
Wow.
But yes, I masked a lot of my grief with alcohol. And I'm aware that can sort of blunt, and I do wonder sometimes whether it caused any, my damage feels too strong, and also the impact of the trauma and everything that went on around her at 6 months old. When will I know? When will I start to see?
What will you start to see?
If she's been massively impacted. Sorry, I should have been more clear, because you do everything you can. I took her to the yoga and, did all the baby groups and play groups and really tried to give her as normal kind of start to life as possible. And she'll be 6 in September, and she wants to plant a little memory garden for her dad in the garden. So she's starting to ask, and actually I have been in touch with Holding On Letting Go about maybe it's time for her to do a weekend with them. But yeah, it's just because I'm asking genuinely for myself as a mother, really, because you're like, when will I know if she's been really traumatized by it?
I mean, I don't have an answer to that. As we've already said, grief is developmental. It happens over phases. But I mean, I think you would probably know now if she'd been kind of psychologically injured at 6 months. You'd see that she had attachment issues, that she probably wouldn't want to go to school, that she maybe was bedwetting, maybe, I don't know. There are all the kind of not sleeping, kind of disturbed behaviours. And it doesn't sound like that she's that at all.
No, it's reassuring. I'm sort of going, few, because no, she's thriving. She's an absolute, and I describe her as a credit to all three of us, because three of us have had a hand in creating that one. It also means I've got two other people to blame when she acts out, right? And the other one that I sort of really focused on, you can see I'm such a little nerd. Like, I don't know if you can see, I've sort of annotated. Unresolved grief is one of the largest causes of psychiatric referrals. And I guess when you think about it, of course it is, because you're shoving down so much pain. And as I said to you, I'm 18 months sober, and it's almost like I've had to regrieve.
Good for you.
Thank you. I'm very proud. It probably is my proudest achievement to date. It really is. It's given my children their mum back, and it's given me my life back. Get quite emotional actually when I say that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
It's But also I realise now, as it's coming out, and I said to you at the beginning, I have therapy, and I'm under the care of a psychiatrist as well for my ADHD and autism. So I believe very much in kind of having therapy, but for about 4 years, I would not do it. I said I wouldn't read self-help books. I would not engage. I tried counselling. It was a woman who told me that she'd Googled me and I used to be really glamorous, at which point I cut ties with that counsellor. And I just... and subsequently, my now husband was very poorly, but I won't go into that at this point. But it meant that I used to say, I cannot open Pandora's box. I cannot, because if I do, it will not close, and my kids need me. And actually, I don't know whether it was the right thing to do, whether I just had to power through. But eventually, I was so drunk at my daughter's birthday party that I started counselling. And here I am, and I feel a very different person. And I'm talking about mindfulness and meditation and yoga and all things that I'd have probably slugged my wine down and laughed at. But I can see now the damage that was doing to me, the pain that was in me. Anybody that has to anaesthetise themselves to the extent I was is holding on to an awful lot of pain. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, the pain is addiction is a short-term solution that causes long-term problems. So, whatever the addiction is. With alcohol, it's to numb pain, but that is, and then we get hooked on the pattern of it, and then it's a self-reinforcing kind of negative cycle, and the pain that we fear gets larger and larger in our mind. And of course, it's compounded by our behavior while we're addicted.
And then the shame.
And the shame and the self-loathing. And in some ways, the addiction people talk about is your primary relationship.
Yeah.
And so that is very disorienting as well. You never feel safe. And then you promise you won't. And then that awful kind of self-loathing.
Yeah. And I believe that comes... Oh, sorry.
You carry on.
I think like that sort of then becomes a barrier to getting help because you become so ashamed. So probably 6 months of counselling, I sort of danced around the issue. And then eventually it came out and she didn't judge me. She didn't refer me to social services. She didn't take my children off me. Nothing terrible happened. In fact, something great happened and I started 100 days sober. And at the end of it, I thought, this is brilliant. I'm going to carry on. But it's kind of the repressed grief, the grief that gets swashed out. That lump in your belly and your throat when you want to cry. And sometimes my kids say, I've got a lump and I need to cry. I'm like, cry. Just have a good old cry. I mean, if it's about something because you've been told off, take it to the other room. But, I suppose I'm a convert to crying. Is that a weird thing to say? I've invested in waterproof mascara and it just flows now.
Well, I mean, crying is physiologically healing. It does release the distress and the pain. It is by allowing ourselves to feel the pain that we heal, because emotions are transmitters of information and they're meant to come through your body and out of your body to adjust to this new reality that you didn't want and you didn't choose. And then all of the things that you do to block that pain is the thing that does you harm over time and sometimes through generations.
I'm interested in your stuff about sort of generational links as well. And sorry, I've written so many notes. I want to sort of make sure I get as much out of you as I can in this time. The guide to telling a child who's died is another thing. I just want to kind of swing back to this sort of talking to children about death. And the way you describe it is you use the word dead. You must be very clear. There must be no room for ambiguity. And now I sat through the night when the police came because at the time he was missing, but he was in the channel. He wasn't alive. And I Googled something I never thought I'd have to Google, which was how do you tell your children their dad has died? And I may even have come across you in those nights, Julia. I don't know because it's much of a blur. But the one thing that kept recurring was this idea that you don't say, particularly in my circumstance where technically he was missing, you don't say he's lost. You don't say he's passed away, gone to sleep. And you say they are dead. And that is a tough word to say, isn't it? I kind of lovingly refer to Ben as my dead husband and John as my alive husband because I sort of want to take ownership back of it because death is, you actually say it yourself, it's the last taboo. And we don't talk about it. We're very scared of it. And I'd spoken on the podcast about this feeling of powerlessness when somebody dies. And I realised that you also have talked about it. And it's this idea we cannot control it. If it comes knocking, I just remember thinking I'm a good human being. Why has this happened? I couldn't argue, negotiate, beg, buy. I couldn't get out of it. And I do think, particularly for children, they are incredibly powerless. And any ambiguity or I think hope actually at the end is quite damaging. And I think that is kind of, I know that's kind of your view on it, but it's difficult to say the word dead to a child, isn't it?
Well, it's a blunt instrument, but death is a blunt instrument. And I think when we try and soften it with metaphors like passed away or lost, we confuse children, and children need the truth, the same truth as all the adults around them, because children have magical thinking and what they make up is often much worse than the truth, however hard the truth is.
Yeah.
Like your son took from your well-intentioned friend, you're the man around the house. He held on to that, and that gave him a whole set of rules and behaviours he thought he should adhere to. And it wasn't
he bottles
the
up
truth.
tears, and he does bottle up his tears. And now I sometimes let him see me cry, and we'll sit and have a cry together.
And it's a perfect example of it not being true. He isn't a man. He was a little boy. He was a bereaved child.
Yeah.
And so I think this idea of protection, we try and protect ourselves, we try and protect our children in the face of unbearable pain and suffering and loss, and a reality that you really never want to feel that you're ever going to face, or that your children are ever going to face. And so, of course, the instinct is to protect, but protection actually causes harm.
And it's that idea, isn't it, that as a child, every Disney film, every children's book, the biggest tragedy that can befall a child is the loss of a parent or parents. And then, of course, the worst thing imaginable, the worst thing they can think of to happen to a child in a film has happened to your child. And you cannot stand in front of the force of that blow. You can't. The world has been shattered. And I try very hard. I'm not perfect. Of course, I'm not. There's the chicken and wine days, as I refer to it. They were pretty bleak, but the kids were loved and they were held and they were, they got to school. There was routine and structure to a certain point. And now I think, I'm crossing my fingers and touching the wooden desk here, that they appear so far to be pretty balanced and emotionally mature children. And I do think that comes a lot from being able to access therapy. And I'm aware that this is a resource that not everybody can, because it is expensive. And sadly, there isn't much provision in the NHS for children. But there are charities that support, aren't there? And I think if you, even, as I said earlier, 5 years into the journey, Tabby is starting to want to ask some questions. And I think for her, she's going to need to process the fact that she doesn't know him. She will never know him. And the friend I mentioned earlier, she was older than her brother, and her brother doesn't remember. But he also doesn't have as much pain. And she said, but would I swap it? No, of course I wouldn't. I'd rather have, and very much how I feel about Ben.
And there can be rivalry between siblings of the children that were older, that got more time, have more memories, have kind of body memories, and have a real bond inside themselves. Yeah, and photos of them together,
Because we had a 6-month-old baby. We weren't taking that many photos. It was third time round, we were knackered. But yeah, it's a very different form of grief, that, because you're grieving somebody that you never knew. And I think at some point I will access some therapy for her. She hasn't necessarily needed it, but my middle son Hector, he talking of their imagination, he wanted to know sharks had eaten his dad's body, and pretty graphic things that I had to answer. But that's an autistic child for you.
What did you say? I mean, you don't know, right?
Well, I've been very factual, because I was able to speak to the RNLI, who had been out looking for Ben, and this particular team had gone out on their training exercises for quite some time after, around the same area, trying to find any sign of him. And they were very candid to me. And I said, will he be found? And they said, we genuinely don't know. He was wearing a dry suit, which is designed to keep you under the water. He was weighted. He was sealed, because it's a dry suit. So the usual processes, and I don't dwell on this too much, wouldn't happen. So depending on the tides and what happens, he could be recovered, or it may be one of these mysteries. It may turn into one of these Broadchurch documentaries that I felt like I was living, dramas like I felt like I was living in. So I just said that to Hector, really, that what he was wearing is designed to keep him at the bottom of the sea, and we don't know. I mean, the other thing is, I've learned that it's okay to tell them that I don't know, because making something up or guessing has the potential to be far more harmful.
Absolutely. Yeah, the truth as much as you know, and some things you don't know. So to be truthful about that.
And they're very aware that I'm doing this, and they're very proud of me, which is nice. And actually, even the teenager he follows me on Instagram. But they are very proud of us, and both of us, of what we're doing. And I think by nature of doing this, even, they are seeing how kind of valuable it is to talk about it. And Hector, I've spoken a bit about this previously on the podcast. He's struggling to access the curriculum at the moment, and he's very bright, and it's just trying to get his needs met. And so I'm going to be schooling him from home, not myself, but during the time I'm going to work through the kind of, you call it the pillars, I've called it like the blobs, and the healing processes. And I'm going to do that with him. I'm going to get him engaged in lots of activities, and because I think at 5 he wasn't able to do it, and now at 10, nearly 11, he is. So it's a luxury I'm able to have because I work for myself. But I'm kind of excited to see how these therapies or processes that we've used would work to help a child through as well.
Well, sure. I mean, you certainly used the app with him. With the journaling.
Yes, I was going to talk about the app.
But because children learn to grieve from observing the parents around them. So you model what he will learn how to do. So when he sees you being sad and then getting on and cooking supper, he sees that you can be sad and then you don't die, the sky doesn't fall in, and you get on and have a nice evening.
Yeah.
And so you model that for him.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about Ben and you're sad and then you're loving Jonathan and happy, and that is what he'll learn.
Yeah. Because I want them to sort of, I suppose, go through life knowing that this is a terrible thing that happened, but it's not going to define their life and who they become. It will be a core part of them. And I actually wonder if it may leave them with more empathy and kindness, because I do think people who've stared into the abyss generally have more compassion. I know I do. And I think, as a general rule, people who have had a terrible thing happen and rebuild themselves, they tend to be pretty awesome human beings. So I've surrounded myself with lots of people like this that have, been walked through hell and come out kind of, to tell the tale. And I just think there's something, it's why I do this, why I invite these people in to tell their stories, because they don't often get the opportunity to do it and to talk about the impact it had on them and how it was living through this. People watching the person they love die of horrible illnesses. And it just, the power of sharing and losing shame, because widowhood is full of shame. It's full of it. You feel like the troll under the bridge that nobody wants to talk to. And it's very isolating, but by talking about it, and my biggest kind of revelation was I could talk about who I am and what I've been through, and people weren't going to recoil. I didn't have to be swigging a bottle of champagne and dancing on a table to have people come to me and like me and be my friends. It's quite enlightening, I guess, that you can show your vulnerability and people do still want to hang out with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of research about post-traumatic growth, so not ever diminishing or reducing the level of the loss or the pain or the devastation of what happened, but that people find, if they allow themselves to feel it, that they feel they were stronger than they realized, that they were able to survive something they thought wasn't survivable. And their perception.
That's how I felt.
And their perception of what matters and what is important changes. But also what you're talking about is the power of vulnerability, isn't it? That people actually don't connect to someone drinking champagne and dancing on a table because it's very disconnecting.
And
but they do connect with authenticity. They connect with genuine feelings.
So I told you I'd talk over you, sorry. It's because I wasn't
right.
And I also think the conversations that I've had and the confidences that have been shared with me, and I've been drunk and I don't remember. Isn't that awful? Whereas now I can have these wonderful, intense conversations, sometimes at the school gates, because that's how I roll now, And I know people and I know so much more about them than I used to. And some of the friendships I've known for years, I feel like I really know them now. And of course you lose friends when you're bereaved. You lose them when you're widowed because nobody really knows what to do with you. You become a bit of a kind of hot potato almost. And I know you talked about the importance of listening and what friends can do. And I think that's true. I think just allowing people to talk and not... Even now, sometimes I've got friends I can still talk to who aren't widowed. And I think that's because the widowed bunch, you can you like to talk about your dead spouse for years with them. But for the non-widowed, sorry, I got off a tangent, but again, come back to the dating again and things like that. They don't quite know what to do with you when you're not shrouded in black, do they? It's like, oh, okay, you got lipstick on. What are we doing now? But I am going to come now to the app, actually, because it's quite a good... resource for people that don't know what to do for their friends. And it's something that I am asked so much. It's probably the most frequently asked question I get is, how can I support somebody? And particularly for me, it's a partner. And I have many, many answers. I even have a little visual that I put on Instagram. But knowing where to direct them, I can help if there's children involved because I've got a little bit of awareness of this. But I struggled for myself. Now, your book is brilliant, and I'm not saying this because you're in front of me and I should, but it genuinely is brilliant. But I wouldn't have picked it up because I am as stubborn as a mule anyway. But I don't do self-help. I don't need telling what to do. The words meditation, mindfulness, and yoga, I'd probably throw my wine at you. So how would you get somebody to engage in this? Is it something that somebody could maybe... Right, in fact, I'm going on too far, Juliet. Right, you tell the listeners a little bit more about the app and then I will ask questions. Let's do it that way around. So when you're ready, you talk a little bit about the app.
So the book does tell stories that I think often the most personal is the most universal, that people see themselves through the stories of others.
Yeah.
But it's much harder from the book to take action and support yourself actively. So the app is about taking the learnings and the insight and the knowledge and the structure of grief works and putting it into an app that is actionable, that is very usable. So it has the 28-day course, and it has tools, and it has the journal, and it sends you nudges, and it has a morning and evening gong. So it's relatable, and it's support for anyone that's grieving, that's on their phone, in their pocket. You don't have to ask anyone if you wake up at 4 a.m. with a pounding heart. You can go to the tools, or you can do some journaling, or you can go to a part of the course, and you can make it for yourself. So you can do a particular part of the course over and over again, or you can miss parts, or you can do it from 1 to 28 if you like chronology. So I think it's as good as therapy. Some people use it alongside their therapies so that they can take it to their therapist. And it fills a huge gap, I think, that, as you said, therapists are expensive, they're not available, they're incredibly busy. And so this, I think, really does fulfill a very important need.
Because I touched briefly on that, but I was really scared of trying therapy. I plucked at the courage. I tried it. I didn't gel with my counsellor, and then I wouldn't go back for 4 years. So some people will have that experience where they take the kind of 6 weeks offering, which is, perfectly enough when your spouse has died, right? And then they sort of think, well, I've had my counselling, what now? And this is where I can really see the value in this, because particularly if somebody has started to engage with counselling and maybe cannot afford to continue, or maybe they haven't got time, because some of these widows and widowers are working full time and raising children. They may not have time. So the idea of it being in your pocket, and the price point is £199 for the year. Now, when I read that, I was like, oof. But then I broke it down, and it's £3.49 a week. So I pay £50 a week to my counsellor. So it's considerably less. And many people will be drinking. And I like to refer back to, you could have a week's counselling for a bottle of wine a night. But also there is the option for somebody to gift it, I'm sure, because if
you can do the 3 months one, which is £50.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do think that actually, if you are struggling, a few of you could all chip in. If 10 of you chipped in £20, you could buy it for somebody, which would be a really kind and useful gift. And believe me, would be so much more appreciated than wine or vodka or flowers, which are the kind of go-to gifts, which, again, very well-meaning, but flowers die, right? You have to look after them. So I think if you have somebody who is bereaved and they are really struggling, but they want to make a change, and that is primarily the key thing, isn't it? Because you cannot force anybody to change. It has to be something that they want to do and they want to engage in, because downloading an app for them is not going to make them walk the path. But how long, just a kind of administrative question. If, for example, say I was to buy this for a friend and they weren't ready to use it, does it last? Is it a year from when they start using it?
By the way, I think the idea of giving it as a friend rather than bringing lasagna or flowers or bottle of wine and sharing it together, I haven't heard someone say that before. I think that's such a lovely idea. And it's a collective kind of idea. I think your year, well, I think the £100 one is universal. I think you have it forever once you've paid that. So I think it's 3 months probably starts when you download it and first start doing the program. But we're also a company of very small numbers of people. So someone could say, listen, I downloaded it. I haven't used it. Can my year start from now? And I'm sure that would be fine.
And that's it, isn't it? And even when I spoke to your colleague about the app, it was very clear that this is, yes, it costs money, but it costs money to make these things, and it costs money for your time and resources. And we run the podcast here. We don't take advertising at the moment. Go on to that. And we don't make money off it. We will perhaps off some future podcasts, but this one I've kind of had it ring fenced. It's my precious, it's my child. And sorry, I've just got off on a tangent. Sorry, right, there we go. So So these things do cost money, but if you, again, like you say, £3.49 a week is not a huge amount of money, and you could gift it to somebody and you could chip in towards it. And I touched there briefly on advertising. Now we have turned down advertising because we feel we want to keep the sanctity of the podcast, the interviews. Now the conversations we have been talking to Julia about, and Julia has very kindly offered us a 10% discount from the app with a code that we will put out for our listeners. Now, we will get a little bit back if you use it as well, full disclosure. It will be used to do what we're doing here. The stuff does not pay for itself, okay? So we will not be going, I don't imagine, on any exotic holidays off the back of this. But it would be nice, and I genuinely say to you, listen, I promise you, we will never endorse anything on this podcast that we don't believe is a real, valuable and useful tool for you. And I genuinely believe in the power of this book, and I haven't used the app myself. I have looked through it, of course I have, but I haven't used it. But from what I have seen, if you're in the chicken and wine phase, I think it's probably, you're going to see the word meditation and go, nope, not for me. But if you are peeking, putting your head above the parapet and you're wanting to make some changes and you're wanting to kind of grab life by the balls, for want of a better expression, then it may be really, really useful. And as I said to Julia, I was not an advocate or a believer in any of this stuff. I now meditate, I do cold water therapy, I do yoga to a fairly crappy degree, but and I walk and I don't know, it does work. Oh, hit the microphone. It does work, guys. It does work. And I genuinely think there is value in this. So if you are interested in finding out a bit more, we can talk about it in Wash Up, and I will let you all know the code.
That's great. And also, by the way, no one wants to be a member of a club that they need help. Nobody. Everyone wants to be able to get up and charge into the day and be happy and sort themselves out.
Yeah.
All of us hate the idea of kind of, oh God, I've got to do my meditation, I've got to do my exercise, or I've got to feel my feelings, or I've got to grieve.
Because it's a pain. Did you say breathe or grieve?
I said grieve.
Yeah, that makes me breathe.
It's a pain in the bum, but we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Living is painful and it costs us emotionally, and we have to find ways to support us, even though we kind of want to go on strike and ignore them. But there isn't
lay in bed
a way
and have chicken
around
and wine. That's what I say, even now. But it's called work for a reason, isn't it? You have to work at it because it isn't easy. If it was easy, we'd all be, swanning about in meadows and sunshine. But even from the outside, it looks like I've got my shit together, that I have this really, and I have a very lovely life, Julia. I'm very happy. I have a wonderful husband and 4 beautiful, wonderful, incredible children. But I still suffer so much with anxiety and PTSD and panic attacks and crushing waves of sadness that can put me on the floor, as you can see. And
it's very painful.
It's very painful. It is. It's very painful. And I do think so many people have said to me, oh gosh, I didn't even know, because I had a horrible panic attack the other day, and then I put my lipstick on, my big sunglasses on, did the school run in a nice dress. Who would have known, right? But by talking about it and sharing it, and not all the time, because sometimes you don't feel that you can, I just think that we're going to make the world so much kinder.
Yeah. And I really admire your courage in being honest and doing the podcast and talking about your experience, because in sharing it yourself, it gives other people permission to feel it and share it themselves.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because that is entirely the purpose of what we're doing here. It is, like I said, we turned on our microphones and we had no idea that within 5 months we'd be speaking to 20,000 people. So I only hope that we continue to do this, and with the support of people like you that are believing in us, we can. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on and speak to me today, Gina. I have genuinely enjoyed it, and I sort of want to book some therapy with you now, because So thank you so much. And for our listeners, the book is called Grief Works, and it's by Julia Samuel, and the app is available now. So we will share the code with you. I might even edit it in after when I've got it, because I just don't have it on me at the moment. But for now, thank you so much, Julia. I really do appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Lovely talking to you, and I hope it's useful for people who are listening. Thank you for inviting me.